the game that took place last night between the Dallas Cowboys and the Minnesota Vikings, all of a sudden, we've gone from the inaugural 2021 NFL season opener, where you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the defending Super Bowl champs, and the biggest franchise perhaps in American team sports, in the Dallas Cowboys meeting up in the very first game of the season in the NFL opener. And the Cowboys lose in this heartbreaking fashion, 31-29. We all remember how that game unfolded. And since that time, all of a sudden you look up and the Dallas Cowboys have won 6 straight games. They're 6-1 and are a top 4 team in the NFL. They've got a top 4 ranking in the NFL, a top 4 record in the NFL. And in business, a CEO and the quality of a company is never measured based on how everything is going when it's smooth sailing, when the CEO is there, when there aren't any issues. The measure of a company is, how do you function? How do you operate when your CEO is missing? Maybe they have to take a week off. They have to miss a couple critical meetings. That's the true measure of a company, is how do you perform? How do you operate when not everything's going your way, when you don't have all the pieces, when it's not smooth sailing, when it's a little bit more turbulent and there is a little bit more turmoil to deal with. And so when we define kind of success in team sports, you're never defined by how you perform, how you operate, how you function when everything is running smoothly. A sea captain isn't going to make his or her money by navigating the waters when it's still. They get paid the money. How do they handle the situation when there are waves crashing down around them, when there's a storm around them, when they're dealing with turmoil? How do you perform when you are without your best asset, without your best player? That's how we're defined in sports. And especially in football, you're not defined by how do you perform if you have the offensive line and you have the quarterback and you have the run game and you have the coaching staff. That's not, and you have the offensive weapons, the wide receivers. That's not how we define whether a team is good, whether a quarterback is good. When they have all the pieces around them, we define them and we measure their greatness based on how they operate when there is instability. And when you look at the Dallas Cowboys yesterday, this was a team that traveled to Minnesota without their CEO, without their starting quarterback, without Dak Prescott. He was a late scratch, so Cooper Rush got the start. We just saw Aaron Rodgers and the Packers go to Green Bay, who was the only undefeated team in the NFL, the best record in the league. And Aaron Rodgers went there without his 3 starting and best wide receivers, Devontae Adams, Allen Lazard, and Marquez Valdez-Scantling. And he went there and he won. And last night, given the fact that the Cowboys actually had to travel on the road without Dak Prescott in the starting lineup, to me, this was the most impressive win of the Cowboys season. This was the most impressive win that the Cowboys collected all year. They weren't that dominant on the ground, only 78 rushing yards. This was a team that ultimately had to overcome 11 penalties, several boneheaded defensive penalties towards the end of the game. Randy Gregory had back-to-back personal fouls, which were just gratuitous, and they just weren't necessary at all. And yet, they had a 17-6 advantage when it came to first down. They were 50% on third down, 7 for 14 as a Cowboys team. They limited the Vikings to 1 for 13. That's 7% on third down. So defensively, they were a nightmare, creating tons of havoc. They had 9 quarterback hits on Cousins, 3 sacks. So all the other components are what helped elevate this team around a guy in Cooper Rush, who, by the way, had never started for the Cowboys in over 4 years. He'd played in 2 other games. he had attempted three passes rather, for a total of 2 yards. And all of those attempts came in 2017 for a guy who was drafted out of Central Michigan in 2017. And this guy goes for 325 yards passing and 2 touchdowns. The defense was supporting him. His offense was supporting him. CeeDee Lamb and Amari Cooper in particular, over 100 yards receiving for both of those guys. That's what you need, a complete effort, a complete team effort to step up. And again, you're measured by the sum of your parts. And to see that type of performance yesterday was absolutely a game that the Cowboys easily could have lost. And to be quite honest with you, probably went into it with the assumption that they would lose. And it was a game that they could afford to lose. The NFC East is weak. Cowboys have a substantial lead over the other teams in their division. Eagles are the next closest team, I believe, and they're still about 3.5, 4 games back of the Cowboys. So from a divisional standpoint, this was certainly a game that you could afford to lose. From a conference standpoint, of course, you don't want to lose any games, so that way you can keep pace with the Cardinals, with the Rams, and with the Packers. But this was a game that the Cowboys basically went into it saying, hey, listen, we're not playing Dak tonight. We want to give him extra time to rest. We want to give him extra time to heal up. And so we're going to start this kid in Cooper Rush and just see what happens. Roll the dice. If we lose, well, we could afford to lose this game. If we win, even better. It reveals even that much more about the team. And that's what was impressive to me is, again, it wasn't pretty. It was flawed. It was ugly, but the Cowboys are just finding ways to win. And at the end of the day, successful teams that go on to have successful seasons, they find ways to win. The average margin of victory in the NFL is 3 points. And it's oftentimes narrowly divided by just a few little plays in every single game. Did you make a couple little plays, either defensively, offensively, fewer turnovers, fewer penalties? That's what it takes. That's what it comes down to. And then the interesting thing is this was the second year in a row that the Cowboys have managed to go on the road and beat the Vikings. There's something about the Cowboys and the Vikings without Dak Prescott, like they have Kirk Cousins' number from the days that he was with the Washington, at the time, Redskins. Now they're just the Washington football team, where something psychologically, the Cowboys just feel like they can beat Kirk Cousins at all times. They've got like a 65% winning percentage against Kirk Cousins all time since he's been an NFL quarterback. And for the second straight year in a row, they go to Minnesota without Dak Prescott, because they beat this Vikings team last year without Dak Prescott 31-28. Dalton Schultz caught the game-winning touchdown pass. And we saw it happen again yesterday. And so it's just important. And I think that it's really impressive. Again, Andy Dalton led them at the time. I think that it was just a huge win, not only for the Cowboys as a team as it relates to their standings. I thought it was a great moment to see the elation on the faces of Cooper Rush's family that were there. That was something special. I'm glad NBC panned over to them and found them in the stands, in the audience, because we don't know how often this is going to happen, especially for a guy in Cooper Rush. Likely won't make many starts, and if he does, it's not always a guarantee that it's going to result in a win. And he actually balled out, and he played well. And again, the Cowboys just finding ways to win. And at the end of the day, that's what distinguishes the really good teams from the average teams in any given NFL season. And it was a big-time win, big-time performance by the Cowboys. So it's a sign of a really good team.